Hi everyone. Okay, now that I'm done staring at the camera, I just wanted to make sure that we're live, everything's okay. So, my name is Richard Medhurst. I'm in London. I'm covering the Julian Assange hearing. I know some of you actually started following me when the Ukraine war started, or maybe it was to do my coverage on Palestine. So you weren't there at the beginning of my coverage of this case, because I've been covering it since the beginning when it began in 2020, right? So back then it was actually, it went on for a couple of weeks, actually, the extradition hearing. So I was in the court today at the Royal Courts of Justice at the Strand in London, and there's going to be another hearing tomorrow, but I'm just going to give you a recap of what happened today, because I can't overstate this enough. I can't overstate enough how important this case is. It's not just about like, oh yeah, it's some dude who's being sent to the United States and that's it. No, like this is really like when people say, oh well, you're attacking the freedom of the press or something, like this is really the best example of that. It's a real, legitimate, genuine threat. And this whole indictment, like the charges that they put against Assange, it's basically, saying that if you publish proof that the United States committed war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is, that's not even controversial. Of course they committed war crimes there. Duh. Well, they're saying that you can go to prison, you're a spy. This is ridiculous. So just to kind of explain to you what's happening, let me go through the thread. Okay, so you should be able to see this now. So this was the live thread that I did. So just again to be clear, tomorrow morning we're going to be continuing on day 2, and I'll be in the court again, and I'll be live tweeting again. All right, so make sure you follow on Twitter. That's the handle, at RichardMedhurst, RichMedhurst. Okay, make sure you follow me. I'll have a live thread. I'll tell you everything that's going on in the courtroom. Okay, so again, for most of you know already the premise. The United States, they want to get Julian Assange from the UK to the US and incarcerate him, and they're just casually threatening him with 175 years. No big deal. I actually mean that. It's 175 years in total, up to 175 years. Even if he gets 30 years, he's 50 years old. It's like a death sentence, okay? So it's really absurd, it's beyond absurd. Now, what happened today, basically, you had Julian's lawyers who were able to argue in court, why they want to appeal two things. Now, one of these is not going to make a lot of sense because, they want to appeal a decision from 2021 by the lower court, okay? Because right now we're in the high court, and there's a decision from the lower court that blocked the extradition. That's good for Assange, okay? That says you don't have to go to the United States. You can stay in the UK. So why would Julian's lawyers want to appeal that if it's in their favor? The reason they want to appeal it is because it was like a bittersweet, hollow victory, okay? People celebrated it at the time, and rightfully so, because of course it is still in Julian's favor at the end of the day. But what the judge actually did is she paved the way for the United States to overturn that. Right, because what she did is she said, okay, Julian Assange can stay in Britain because he's too sick to go to the United States, and if he goes to the United States, he'll kill himself. I mean, this is a real risk. It's not a joke. It's not the judge who's like making this up. You got, I remember in court, you had like 4 or 5 doctors who came and testified and said, yeah, like this guy is really suffering because of what you're doing to him, and if he's going to kill himself. So there's a real risk there. Yeah, make no mistake. But the point about journalism is that, she agreed, the judge, she agreed with all of the charges. She said, yeah, like this is criminal behavior, and actually it would be criminal in the UK as well. It's criminal in the US because, when you're extraditing someone, you have to establish dual criminality anyway. There needs to be an assessment. Like if you're trying to extradite someone from, Spain to Morocco on charges of murder, well, murder has to be a crime in both countries, right? It makes sense. So she has to, make this dual criminality assessment anyway, but that doesn't, make it any less egregious. It still means that she's criminalizing journalism in the UK under the Official Secrets Act, which is the equivalent of what Assange is being charged with in the US, the Espionage Act. So that, there's so many bad things, so many wrong things with this decision, and of course she never even touches the whole point about, there's no analysis, there's no address regarding the fact that Julian Assange is exposing, criminal behavior like we've never seen before. You got like US helicopter pilots massacring children and like laughing about it. How could you say that this should not be exposed? Are you saying that you should be able to machine gun people and keep that a secret because the army did it? I mean, think of this logic. She doesn't address this, and she shrugs off the threats. You've got the president of the United States saying Assange should be killed. You've got the director of the CIA saying this guy's a hostile, he's an enemy. You've got, stories coming out in the press that the CIA want to kidnap and poison him. You've got people who worked in the embassy where Assange was for the CIA, basically contracted, saying, yeah, we were told to maybe, that there might be a plan to kidnap and poison him. So, she shrugs these things off. It's like she doesn't actually appreciate how serious they are, that the United States government wants to kill this guy. So that's the first point that Assange's people are appealing, because, keep in mind, we're in 2024 and this happened in 2021, and for 3 years all we've been talking about is Assange's health and these assurances. And again, they're very important points, but the crux of the issue has never been addressed until now. That's why this is so good and so important that this they tackle this. The other point that Assange's people were tackling, and remember, this is not an actual appeal. They need permission. They basically need the High Court to grant them leave to appeal. You can't just immediately say, I don't like your decision. You need to go to the High Court and you need to say, I don't like your decision or I don't like the lower court's decision because of ABC. And then the High Court says, okay, you can appeal and we'll go into a bit, more detail. So this is just preliminary. So the other point is the fact that the Home Secretary, so this would be the Interior Minister in another country. This was Priti Patel at the time. It's Braverman now. But Priti Patel, what she did is she just signed the extradition order. Remember, because at the end of the day, when you're extraditing someone from the United Kingdom, the Home Secretary has the final say. It's up to her or them. We've had so many female Home Secretaries. I said her. Theresa May and Braverman and Patel. So in any case, they have the final say. And you can block Assange's extradition on a million grounds. You don't have to go looking in the Human Rights Act and necessarily, because I'll go more into detail about why I bring that up. But these are the two main grounds. And so let me read to you from the thread. Let me go through this with you guys, in more detail and see what Julian's lawyers argued. So Julian's lawyers, these are not his only lawyers, but today we had Edward Fitzgerald and Mark Summers who were in court. And it's actually funny, by the way, I don't think a lot of people know this, but Mark Summers used to prosecute people for extradition, and now he defends them against extradition in the UK. So that's funny. But anyway, so just going through this, right? The main point here, and this is something that I've always argued myself also, and I'm really glad they brought this up already back then and now once more, is that, under the extradition treaty between the United States and the UK, there's a section 4, that says you cannot extradite someone for a political offense. What is a political offense? A political offense is basically, bogus charges, where you just want to put someone in prison because you don't like them. That's what it is. You don't like their work. You don't like how they think or how they speak. You just want to throw them in jail. They didn't actually commit a crime. You just want them in jail because you hate them. Okay, that's really like the most simplified explanation of a political offense. And the extradition treaty says, no, you can't do this. Now, here's the catch. This was drafted in 2003. What was happening in 2003, in 2002, in 2001? You had the war on terror. So the United States was really like sinking its hooks, its fangs and its claws into everyone, into Britain, into Spain, into Germany, even more than before, to make sure that United States law applies in other countries. You're going to hand over this guy and that guy and this one because we want them. They didn't do anything. We don't care. We just want to put them in Guantanamo Bay. We want to just torture them. You're going to hand them over. And so this, since the very beginning, and I've gone back on the Parliament's website, and I've gone back looking in the archives on the videos, watching, 20 years ago, 23 years ago, people saying this is too favorable to the United States. It's unbalanced. It's unfair. It gives everything to the U.S. and leaves Britons with no protection, right? And yeah, you see that to this day. And so the point is that the treaty bars extradition for a political offense. You cannot throw someone in jail from Britain to America or America to Britain because you don't like them. But when you have a treaty, so you sign a document between two countries, an agreement between two countries, you still have to go and translate that into British common law, okay, into English law. You have to make an equivalent inside the country of a copy of that document. And so the equivalent of the of the extradition treaty is the Extradition Act, just as the Human Rights Act is the equivalent of the European Convention of Human Rights, okay? So usually when it ends with act, it's the British equivalent or the English equivalent in English law. So here's the catch. The treaty between America and Britain says no extradition for political offenses, but for some reason, that protection is missing inside English law. So it's like, it's a really smart, funny, clever way that the lawyers came up with to make sure that you can still send people from Britain to America for political offenses, to make sure that loophole exists, just so they can please Washington. So that's what Julian's lawyers were arguing. They were saying, this is ridiculous. You can't just act like, and they're talking about, of course, the judge in the lower court. You can't just pretend like, this protection doesn't exist because for some reason it wasn't translated into English common law. It's written in the goddamn treaty. It says it right there. You cannot extradite someone for a political or military offense, period. End of story. Okay? So, the fact is that what Julian Assange is being accused of is a political offense. He's a journalist, right? This is one of the most classic political crimes, that you can think of. A journalist publishes government documents which are real, which are genuine, which piss off the government, which anger them. Oh, the government now wants to throw that person in jail. This is wrong. You can't do that. So. Of course, what Julian Assange is being accused of is absolutely political, and it's not just protected against by the extradition treaty. It's also protected against, by the United Nations, by the Interpol Convention, and numerous other things which were brought up, right? And so that's one point, Fitzgerald, so one of Assange's lawyers, was saying espionage is recognized by leading academic authorities to be a purely political offense, right? So even when you're saying that he's a spy, which he's obviously not because he's a journalist, but you're accusing him of espionage, this is one of the most classic ways to put someone in prison. Oh, I don't like what you're doing. You're obviously a traitor and you're working for a foreign government. Go to jail. So they go on to say that treason and espionage are described in previous cases as political offenses, and they have been successfully used to block extradition, right? And so how does he back this up? How do Julian's lawyers prove that Assange is being persecuted politically by the United States? Well, he just quotes the CIA director. Back then, Mike Pompeo was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, and he gave a speech in 2017, and he famously said that WikiLeaks, which is the publishing house that Assange founded, he called it a non-state hostile intelligence agency, right? So it's quite a mouthful, but basically he's saying it's an enemy, and saying that it's hostile, meaning it has to be dealt with, right? So it's like a declaration of war. And this was around the time of the Vault 7 leaks. Okay, so you have to understand that WikiLeaks have published a series of batches of various documents about the Iraq War, about the Afghanistan War, about Guantanamo Bay, about the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, the State Department cables. And another thing that came out, which was later on in 2017, this is the Vault 7 leaks. These are files about the technological capabilities of the CIA, right? And so this really angered the United States government, particularly Pompeo and also Trump, right? So they set out to really take revenge on Julian after this. This was really, it's not a coincidence. So Fitzgerald then talked about the mountain of testimony, provided by expert witnesses during the start of the extradition case. That basically what Julian is doing is he's just trying to, expose these crimes so the United States government clean up their act, so they stop just massacring civilians. You shame the United States government into behaving like, like someone who's not a psychopath. And that is, what are you going to describe that as? Well, spying, espionage, well, he's guilty maybe of spying for the sake of humanity, so to speak, but not actual espionage. You can't actually call that spying. So he also says that, you have centuries old tradition in Anglo-American law that also bars extradition for political offenses. And then he talks about the European Convention of Human Rights, okay? And he again reminds the court of the obligations to respect that. It's not just a European thing. No, this has nothing to do with Brexit. The European Council is separate from the European Union, and Britain is a party to the European Council, meaning the European Convention of Human Rights is translated into British law as the Human Rights Act. People have human rights. You have to respect them. And many of these rights are being violated in this case. Julian's right to a fair trial, a due process. I mean, just the fact that they collected evidence against him illegally. This is any court in the world that is serious would never allow you to present evidence that you stole, that you collected illegally, because it's not valid. You cannot, you're violating the rules of admissibility into a court of law. So the United States stole his laptops, books, and other things when he was dragged out of the embassy. The Ecuadorians handed this over to the Americans. There was no case against Assange. Why would you give them to the Americans? Why not to the government in Mozambique or China? Why did you give them to the Americans? So you can see this has been very carefully planned out from the start, right? They wanted to get him out of the embassy, charge him with a bail violation, and then while he's in prison with the bail violation, unseal this indictment where he's charged with espionage and all this crap, and make sure he stays in jail. So basically his rights under Article 5 were being violated, and of course that applies not just, as I said, as a European thing. It's incorporated in English law. And he said that it would constitute an abusive process for the UK to just simply ignore, its obligations and responsibilities. These things have to be protected. So then afterwards, Mark Summers takes over, and he changes. They switch over from talking about this extradition treaty, and they talk about the fact that. Well, actually, this is funny. A lot of people didn't know what he was talking about in the beginning because the infrastructure in the court is not very good. I have to point this out that. The royal courts of justice are basically, it's a beautiful building. It's very nice. Great Gothic architecture, but for some reason the microphones. Well, this is a problem that's been present throughout the whole case. Some people say it's on purpose. Others say it's not. You can make up your own mind about that. But a lot of people who were in the overflow room or the press annex, they could not hear what the lawyers were saying, which makes it obviously very difficult to follow the case. And you can imagine why a government that is complicit in jailing this journalist would not want people to listen in. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing. I'm not saying it's necessarily the case. But in any case, so Mark Summers explains, again, Mark Summers is one of Julian's lawyers, right? He explains that the documents, the cables released by Assange and WikiLeaks, they have proven, obscene amounts of crimes, war crimes committed by the United States, right? Rendering people, so basically, snatching them, right? Torturing people. And so the nature of the retaliation in this case, like how does the state attack Assange in return? It's of course prosecution. That's how they're punishing him. That is the punishment. It's the indictment. It's the charges, the 17 charges of espionage and the charge of conspiracy to commit computer hacking, right? So this is basically very clearly, an attack on Assange that is political by its very nature. That's the point that he's trying to establish. Okay, the victim here in this case, so-called, so to speak, the so-called victim, it's not a person. There's no actual victimhood to speak of, but the state, the government in the United States is perceiving this as an attack, like telling the truth, exposing its dirty, their dirty laundry in public, these crimes. They perceive that as an attack, and so they're going after him with a persecution. But you can't really speak of this as a legitimate crime, because it isn't a crime. It's just a political offense in the sense that they don't like what he said. So they're saying that the district judge. So just again to remind you, that's the lower court. The district court is underneath the high court, and the judge presiding over that case was Vanessa Barretza, that's her name. And Mark Summers, goes on to explain that basically Barretza, she didn't address any of this retaliation by the U.S. government against Julian Assange, right? And he said it was established that the United States government has a very long-standing practice of obstructing and preventing investigations around the world. And he specifically points to the fact, and again, this is very ironic, because we know this because of Assange, that the United States have interfered in Spain, in Italy, in Germany, in European countries to stop U.S. officials, CIA, agents from being prosecuted because they tortured people. They were caught spying and torturing and kidnapping people, and the United States has so much control over these European countries that it calls allies, that it made sure that nothing actually happened. So his point is that this is a government that has a habit, that has a history of obstructing justice. It doesn't want any actual due process. It doesn't want any form of justice or of accountability. So why would you think that they actually care all of a sudden about anything of that sort, right? And again, the irony here is that we know these things because of who? Because of Assange and WikiLeaks. So you understand the value of transparency that the disclosures bring with them. And so, Mark Summers goes on to say that the United States have prosecuted and threatened many people who revealed or who wanted to reveal U.S. crimes in the fashion that they are to Assange. He says that the lower court didn't deal with the question of why didn't the U.S. government prosecute Assange for 6 years? Because remember, the documents that they're charging him with as having constituted espionage are things pertaining to the Iraq War, to the Afghanistan War. So it's Iraq war logs, Afghanistan war diaries, and the State Department cables, right? So the thing is that these the publications happened during the time of a previous administration when Obama was in charge. Why didn't Obama prosecute Assange? Why did Trump and Pompeo suddenly decide to attack Julian? Oh, yeah, it's because of the CIA files. So he's not being charged for publishing the Vault 7 files, but that's the real reason behind this persecution and prosecution. That's the real reason, and that shows you that it's political. They don't actually care about the previous things, and they know that it's not a crime. And the Obama administration knew at the time, how can you put Assange in jail? If you're going to put Assange in jail, you've got to put the New York Times in jail, you've got to put the Guardian in jail, you've got to put Le Monde in jail, and other publications, European and Spanish ones, that printed the same exact documents. There are outlets and websites that publish these documents before WikiLeaks and Assange. Never contacted, never bothered, never prosecuted by the U.S. government. Not interested in them. They want to go after Assange, make an example of him. So, his point here is that, Assange just angered them, and that's why they're going after him. Okay, and he says that the district judge, she didn't consider the timing. She just, she didn't even address it. She didn't understand that at the time the ICC, the International Criminal Court, were going after the Americans for their war crimes in Afghanistan, using some of the materials that Assange published. That's another thing that angered them. And you guys might remember, I covered this when I forgot her name, but she was the chief prosecutor, the previous one of the ICC, and the head of the judiciary, both of them, Trump and Pompeo, again, the same two people, put sanctions on them for the same thing, for the same issue, investigating U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan. So you can see the United States doesn't like anyone who exposes their vicious behavior overseas around the world, and will punish them for that, and they want anything but accountability or a judicial process. So he explains that this is an important backdrop, right? You have to understand what was going on at the time. And these accusations by Pompeo that Russia was working with Julian Assange, which some people still foolishly repeat to this day. There's literally zero evidence of that. It's like, as if anyone gives a crap about Trump. You got people being shot at by an Apache helicopter in Iraq. What the hell does that have to do with Russia? This is not the point. But they want to change the subject. So in any case, he says that there was a lot of attacks at the time being lobbed at Assange. You have to take this into consideration. And he says that essentially when Pompeo said that WikiLeaks is a non-state hostile intelligence service, even Assange's own people didn't think this is anything more than a verbal attack, but they were wrong, because this was these words essentially marked the beginning of this campaign against Julian. And we later found this out through the Yahoo News interviews and exposés with numerous anonymous U.S. officials, and the protected witness statement in the court. So basically, you had two witnesses, anonymous to us, who used to work in the embassy where Assange was for 7 years, and the company they worked for, UC Global, was contracted by the CIA. So they testified to the court that we were working for the CIA, we were spying on Assange, and we were trying to hurt him. And so he's saying, he's basically telling the High Court, Assange's lawyer, he's saying this information wasn't taken into account. We've got people coming and saying we were trying to hurt Assange for the Americans at the behest of the CIA, and yet she doesn't address this, right? I remember specifically reading this in her judgment. She says that she was waiting for the court case in Spain to play out, but I mean, what difference does that make? This is the truth, right? You can't just ignore it. In any case, moving on. Right, so he's trying to establish the fact that you had an administration-wide effort to attack Assange. It's not just the CIA that, basically Mike Pompeo, who woke up one morning and said, I'm going to go after him. It's a personal vendetta. I mean, he did basically, but it wasn't just the CIA, right? It's not just one government agency, which would already be bad enough, right? It's an effort throughout the entire agency, and it's also linked to the executive, right? To the other part of the executive, meaning Trump. I mean, Trump was literally asking and requesting and receiving plans, sketches on how to kill Assange. So this is, again, it's an administration-wide effort. It's a government-level conspiracy, if you will, to go after Assange, right? So Mark Summers says it gets even worse. The district judge thought that there was nothing fishy about the timing of the extradition. Yeah, absolutely. It is very, very weird that she doesn't seem to understand this, or didn't seem to understand this, rather. And of course, he says what I told you before, that they got him in jail on purpose so they could unseal this indictment. The fact is that the decision to go after Assange, it's not just with we're going to extradite him, we're going to try through the legal avenues available to us in order to persecute him. This is through various means. They're thinking of rendering him, so basically snatching him, of killing him, and the prosecution is just another idea they came up with. This case is another way that they came up with to attack Assange. So the point here, again, we come back to, is that this is an attack on Assange because they don't like him. It's not because he actually committed a crime. Because if it was just about legalities and about the fact that he is guilty of a crime, you would only try to extradite him, and you would actually have a case to present. They don't. They were trying to kill this guy. They were trying to snatch him. They were spying on him. You know, these are established facts. So we can see here that this is a personal vendetta. It's an administration-wide vendetta, and you know, it's completely you know, wild and lawless. So they also, you know, Mark Summers points out that this decision to go after Assange was plainly provided to ground-level prosecutors, right? So the executive basically handing down instructions to the Department of Justice to go after Assange. And he makes the point that, you know, you didn't have to wait. The judge back in 2021, Baretzer, she didn't have to wait until last year for this Yahoo News thing to come out, where, you know, they've interviewed 30 CIA people who say that they wanted to kill Assange. You didn't need that. You could have already, you know, looked at the current evidence in 2021 and arrived at the same conclusion. Yeah, the United States hate Assange and they want to kill him. You didn't have to wait for this. So the fact also that they took one count, they you know, basically one count of so-called alleged, you know, claimed espionage, and then spread it out into 18 counts, right? And basically in total, if you count also the conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. This is also, you know, a violation of Assange's human rights, and it's also an indication of the malfeasance on behalf of the US government. So he says, even on a circumstantial level, even at its lowest level, the judge should have rejected the case. And she did not engage at all with the core proposition that there was explosive material. Otherwise, she would have arrived at a different conclusion, right? So he says that the High Court has the power to and should reevaluate situations where judges simply disregard relevant facts, right? Like you can, he's telling them, you guys can and should and must do this, right? And you can intervene and you can stop this. And this extradition request is a misuse of the law. Those are the words he used, a misuse of the law. So forgive me. He said, once again, the quality was not so good. He said it was a misuse essentially of you know, the treaties and that the UK is a party to, not just the extradition treaty, of course, but the European Convention on Human Rights and the Human Rights Act, and all the obligations that the state is subjected to in order to protect people that are residing in Britain or who are British, right? So the entire extradition case against Assange should have been thrown out. That's basically his main point. Afterwards, we have Mark Summers going through, you know, examples of U.S. cases where he basically said, like, look, this guy published U.S. secret, U.S. state secret, no punishment. This other outlet or person published something secret in the United States that was classified. Also, they weren't punished. So his point is that this whole case against Assange is unprecedented. It's never happened before. It's not only so big and wild in its scope, but, you know, in its very nature, it is unprecedented. It's just never happened before, and it's never happened before because it's wrong, right? Because previous administrations knew this, and then he goes into detail regarding the European Convention on Human Rights, and so what he says here is basically that under Article 7, okay. The district judge, she shouldn't have just assumed that, you know, the Article 7 in Europe is, you know, is equal to the Fifth Amendment in the United States, right? Because it's not. That's the point that they're trying to make. They're saying that you can't just assume Assange will be afforded the same protections once he sets foot in America under the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution as if he were still in Europe or in a Council of Europe country, where he is granted the protections under Article 7. Right? Because he's saying that they fall short, and that the district judge, she should have demanded that the United States prove and justify to the court that the Fifth Amendment meets the threshold and of the protections afforded under Article 7. Okay, and of course this was never done. Article 7 addresses the fact that you cannot just, put someone in prison and punish them through prejudice and in a fashion that is unlawful and ridiculous, in the fashion that Assange is being persecuted. Then he talks also about Article 10, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and he says that, well, who gave Assange the files? Who passed on these files to Assange? Because Assange is not a US citizen. Assange has never lived in America, doesn't come from America. He's Australian, right? So he's Australian working in the UK. Who gave him the files? Chelsea Manning. And so she was subject to a court-martial because she was in the military. And they gave her 35 years, and then the sentence was commuted. And what Assange's lawyers were arguing today is that if you took Chelsea Manning, okay, and she was in Europe, and you subjected her to the threshold of Article 10, like, what do her actions, does Article 10 protect her? Even though she was sworn professionally as a soldier, she was bound to the laws of state secrecy. But could she still have gotten away with passing on these documents? The answer is yes. Why? Because we look at, of course, the proportionality and basically the weight of what she published. Like the things she gave to Assange are so explosive, are so damning, are so outrageous, are so obscene, are so grotesque, that of course she is protected under Article 10 because there is a case of public interest to be made here. The public has a right to know. This is the United States Army machine gunning journalists, killing children. Of course, like how could this not be protected under Article 10? It outweighs the secrecy laws that she would be bound to. And so he goes on to say that the revelations of US war crimes provided to Julian Assange by Chelsea Manning, they couldn't even prove that anyone was harmed, because this is another myth that, these unredacted names, they harm people. The United States conducted their own investigation. They couldn't find a single name, a single person who was actually harmed. And again, if when I was reporting on this initially, during the district court phase, man, so many people who did this work of redacting the documents and making sure they don't publish someone's name where it's not really relevant to know the name, and trying to make sure that they're handling these documents with care. And because remember, there were many media partners that actually worked with WikiLeaks. Do you know how many people I listened to in court who talked about the tireless effort that they underwent in order to redact these documents? Too many to mention. So not only was nobody harmed, but WikiLeaks, Assange went through so much effort to make sure that nothing unredacted would be published. But again, the reason why this happened is too long to go into, so I'm just going to leave it at that. And so he says that there is no allegation that any one name, not a single person, has actually come to harm. And that is an important matter. And so he then talks about the disproportionality of sentencing. Chelsea Manning was given 35 years, and she exposed, this is what he called the apex level criminality off the scale that we have never come across before, right? He's right. And so he says that if Chelsea Manning is protected, under Article 10, well then obviously Assange is protected too. And why is he going through all of this test, this legal test? Because we are in Europe and bound to the Human Rights Act and the European Convention of Human Rights. So this legal test has to be met. It has to be addressed. But the district judge failed to do that. So after that, they're also talking about. Give me a second to just find my place here in the thread, because Twitter messed up some of it in a few places, but not to worry. So I was going to show you some of the crowds, like some of the people that attended. Very big crowds, honestly. When I arrived there, you got people banging on the drums and yelling and chanting. It's very good. Really huge turnout. I would say it was even larger than the one in 2020 at the Old Bailey. It was even larger than that. So that means more and more people are coming out for his case, and you know, the attention it deserves is growing. So yeah, just give me a second here, it's loading. Right, so just a final note on Article 10. He says that obviously, you know, this underscores the interest of a free press, of having a free press, and you have to take public interest into account. And you know, they then talked about also the fact that so this is when Edward Fitzgerald takes over again for Julian Assange. They talked about the fact that if he were to be extradited to the US, you know, there is undeniable evidence that they're going to give him the harshest sentence possible, right? So they can even do it in a way that is basically in violation of the rule of specialty, right? So the rule of specialty stipulates that when you extradite someone from one jurisdiction to another, from one country to another, or one state to another, that you don't pile on new charges. You can't like move someone, you know, from Tanzania to Morocco for, you know, for let's say theft, and then say, oh, actually now we're going to charge you with murder. You can't do that. But is the United States going to do that? Is there any proof, any indication they would do that? Absolutely. Absolutely. The fact that they only charged Assange with, you know, some of the documents that he published, and left the other tranches or bunches of documents as future potential cases indicates this. And of course, we've heard statements from US officials referring to such scenarios, right? So as Assange's lawyer puts it, you know, they could attack Assange in court once he's in the US and imprison him, convict him for things that he hasn't even been indicted for, things that he's been acquitted for, using you know, evidence that has been illegally obtained, right? So there would be a complete disregard for the rules of admissibility in court by the United States. And again, this is not just a violation of, you know, the European Convention of Human Rights. This is a violation of American law. It's a violation of British law. You cannot just, you know, bring up random evidence and then throw it inside the courtroom, especially if it was obtained illegally, right? And you can't just pile on new charges on somebody once you've extradited them. So these are very old, you know, long-established principles that the U.S. would absolutely violate, no problem. You know, you can bet anything you like they will. So he says that you know, this is a gross violation of justice, and we have big reason to believe it will happen in Assange's case, because the Vault 7 leaks made them so angry. This is a serious risk. It must be taken into account. And he referenced the example of Garcia. Garcia is someone who was, if I'm not mistaken, extradited within the United States from one state to another, initially for distribution of marijuana, and then ultimately he was punished for murder. Right, so suddenly the charges went from you handed out or you sold marijuana to you killed someone. So his point is that the United States have a habit of adding new charges once they've extradited someone, and you cannot trust them to refrain from such, were Julian to, you know, be rendered in their custody. So a very big problem that hasn't been addressed thus far. So I'm just again, I'm just loading the rest of this. You know, it's actually very difficult live tweeting because I'm a fast typer. I can get most of what they're saying, almost word for word, but on Twitter you have to like keep scrolling up to the top. It's a nightmare, and then sometimes they still break your threads, which is really annoying. So bear with me a second here. And I met a lot of you people when I was at the court. So thank you to all of your kind words. I appreciate it very much. In case you're watching, and it was very good seeing people come, show up with the Palestine flags as well. Let me play you some of the videos I posted so you can see how the crowds were outside. Because the mainstream media, they tried to pretend like, oh, there weren't so many people, but it's not true. You definitely had a lot of people. I mean, without question. Like I had trouble getting into the court. I got swamped by people, but at the same time, like it was just packed. You really had to struggle to get in. That's how crowded it was. How plentiful it was, shall we say? Of course, in a good sense. So this is when you're walking up to the court, you can already hear the banging of the drums. Give me a second. Right, so you should be able to see that now. And then there's another one. Give me a second to put it on for you. Yeah.
Now, free Julian Assange. Now, free Julian Assange. Now, free Julian Assange.
Yeah. So very very good show put on by the activists. Very very well done. And just going back to some of the points that they made, the last couple of points that they made, they basically said that when you look at the fact that Julian Assange, he's like, why is he being extradited? Why is the United States after him? I think Mark Summers did a great job because he cut straight to the point, and he said basically that, look, if you look at the judgment from 2021, the district judge is acting like, yeah, these crimes should be secret. They should stay secret. That you should have the right to kill people. You should have the right to torture people, and that is not allowed to be known or published, or the public shouldn't know about these things because they just happen to be secrets, and they should stay secret. So you should be able to get away with that. That's basically the point that she's making, right? That, yeah, you can get away with these crimes. It's because they're secret, they're classified. And this logic is disgusting. I mean, when you do a balancing act of proportionality, you say, like, is this actually justifiable? Like, can you violate your oath to secrecy? Let's say if we're talking about Chelsea Manning, right? Because Julian Assange, again, not a U.S. citizen, not in the army, never lived or worked in the U.S. But if you do this balancing act, I mean, only a killer or someone who's trying to protect the killers would say that these crimes should stay secrets. Do you understand? And that is the government position in the UK and the US, and that tells you everything, right? About who is, who's running the show here. So basically, the other point that Mark Summers made is that it's disgusting in a way, because the district judge she has sympathy with the government. Like, what Assange did is absolutely criminal. It's absolutely espionage, and if he had done it in Britain, it would also be espionage. She goes through all this reasoning and drawing an equivalence between the two, but then she doesn't do this same balancing act, for the other side of the argument, which is that people should know about this stuff because of how horrendous and horrific it is. There's a case of public interest to be made. Never addresses it. It's completely, utterly absent from the entire judgment. And this is something that's been frustrating, because it's been going on for like 4 years now almost, and no judge has actually talked about the fact that Julian Assange is basically in prison because he published evidence of like horrific crimes. And by the way, the people who committed these crimes are free. Like, how can you justify this? What kind of justice system is this? So, that was a very good job by Mark Summers, and he says that. So when Fitzgerald takes over again, he also recalls the absurdity of the U.S. argument, and this is again something that I find very amusing, that on the part of the Americans, is that the United States want to prosecute Julian Assange with U.S. law, and at the same time deny him any protections under U.S. law. So they want to have their cake and eat it too, right? Like, we're going to hit you with the Espionage Act, which is an American law, but you can't have the First Amendment rights under American law. You only get to have the bad American laws, and slapped on you. No rights, only bad things, because you're a foreign national. Well, if he's, if he doesn't qualify for First Amendment protections. By the way, First Amendment, for those who don't know, is basically, it enshrines people's right to free speech. There's no like special thing for journalists. It's for everybody. You're a plumber, you're a teacher, you flip burgers, whatever you do, you have free speech, right? It's supposed to be one of the strongest in the world, right? It's supposed to be. So, and the point is that there's horrific hypocrisy going on here, and it's not just hypothetical. We've had Kronberg, who's a federal prosecutor in the United States, who spoke to the court, and he was literally saying, like, yeah, actually, he didn't say that they're going to do it for sure, but he hinted at it, which means they're going to do it, right? So he basically said that the United States is gonna, in so many words, he admitted the United States will seek, like, once Julian is extradited, they will seek in court to deny him First Amendment rights on the basis that he is an alien foreign national, right? So not only that, it's Pompeo also who said these things, right? I'll show you the quote on the screen. Mike Pompeo, who was the CIA director and then the Secretary of State, he said that Julian Assange he said that Julian Assange has no First Amendment freedoms. All right, those are the words he said. Assange has no First Amendment freedoms, period. So, it's a very clear attack on the press. Right? Very, very clear attack on the press. And there have been no, assurances or protections or guarantees afforded to the United Kingdom by the United States, saying that they will give or accord Julian Assange First Amendment rights. So, basically the point he's trying to say here is that the United Kingdom, they haven't even bothered to ask for a promise, right? A so-called promise that the United States, won't behave like this. So, they're basically saying, go ahead and do whatever you want. You want to take Assange and then say he doesn't have any First Amendment rights? Go ahead. That's the conclusion. Then he talks about, of course, the right to a fair trial. Why Julian Assange is guaranteed not to receive a fair trial. I already 4 years ago, I made a video about like every one of these points for Assange, it's there's so much wrong with this case. Like really, it's really bad. It's really, really bad. I think it's like there's just no way you can put this guy in prison legally. You just can't. Like, if you look at the law, you can't put this guy in prison. You just can't. He didn't commit a crime. And there are like so many reasons you could throw the case out. Let's imagine, for the sake of argument, let's play devil's advocate and imagine that, yeah, Julian Assange, he committed a crime, supposedly. The evidence the United States is going to bring once they try him in the US, if they try him in the US, was obtained illegally. So even if he had committed a crime, the case would have to be thrown out on the basis that the rules of admissibility to the court of law were violated, right? It's tainted evidence. Can't submit it. So, this is just one example, of course, because when you deny someone their right to a fair trial, you deny them due process. I mean, like I said, you're violating the European Convention on Human Rights, you're violating English law, you're violating the US Constitution, you're violating every fucking jurisdiction, excuse my French, that you can think of. Every jurisdiction. There's no exception. There's no place where this plays out fine, so Fitzgerald makes the point, of course, that going back to that original thing, that Julian Assange, once he gets there, there's a very good chance that they're going to slap additional charges on him and violate the rule of specialty, which is, again, this is a long-standing doctrine that has, long been established in extradition or bilateral extradition law, that you can't just like grab someone to, put them in another country or another state and then now accuse them of a different crime that you pulled out of a hat. So, the big problem. And also, of course, the fact is that, the assurances provided by the United States, again, I don't want to say the judges didn't know what they're talking about, but I had the impression when they asked these questions, okay, because what happened is they were discussing the assurances, and one of the judges said that he spoke as if he didn't understand prisoner transfer treaty, which was shocking to me because this is not something like some special secret convention that is rarely spoken of. This is the Strasbourg prisoner transfer treaty. It's not that difficult to remember, but and I was kind of shocked that he had to ask about these things. Maybe I misunderstood at the time. I mean, I don't think so, but it seemed a bit weird to me that this needed to be explained. The fact that, look, this assurance the United States said about how Julian can go and serve out whatever sentence he's given for this imaginary crime in Australia, that like this is supposed to make him feel better. You can't just like put Julian Assange on a boat and then dump him on the beach in Australia. It doesn't work like that. You need Australia to say, yes, we accept to take Julian Assange. Right, you need both countries to accept. Australia has not accepted. Like they maybe say they will, but they haven't accepted. Right. So that's one thing. Another thing is that you have to your sentence has to be finalized. That means that you have exhausted all appeals, all avenue of appeals, and the sentence is final. Like you've gone to the High Court, you've received the sentence, you went to the High Court, you went to the Supreme Court, and you did everything possible to challenge the sentence, and whatever happened, you got this sentence at the end. Maybe 20 years became 5 years, maybe it stayed 20, whatever you get. It has to be final before you can even make an application. So do you understand how long that would take in the United States to get to the Supreme Court? 10 years, easily 10 years. Right, that's like roughly how long it takes on average. 10 years until you reach that level, and that's if they even want to listen or take your case at the Supreme Court. They're under no obligation to actually look at it. Before. Also, Assange in this case, in the extradition case, tried to go into the Supreme Court. They wouldn't have it. So, the point here is that Assange would spend a long time suffering, waiting for him to exhaust the appeals process before he could even move, and even then it's like, why are we even talking about this, because he hasn't committed a crime, and how is sending him to Australia supposed to make that better? In any case, the judges were asking about this, and Fitzgerald was explaining them, explaining the rules to them, and again, I stress this point because previously when in Julian's case, they were only discussing the assurances, right? One of the cases, and there are many cases, that Julian's lawyers cited was Mendoza's. Okay, so in the Mendoza case, the United States said, we want this guy Mendoza to be extradited from Spain to the US. We want to try him, and we agreed to send him back to Spain so he can be close to his family. That's the agreement that the assurances that they came up with. And it wasn't just an assurance, by the way, because an assurance is not a legally binding document. It's just a piece of paper, it's a diplomatic note. It's like it's a promise, but it's not a contract. But what happened is that the Spanish judiciary looked at these assurances given by the US and they said, like, what is this crap? It's like, come back with something more concrete, and then maybe we'll give you Mendoza. You try him and you send him back. And so they did. The United States was forced by the Spanish judiciary to come up with a contract, and this contract was signed by all three parties, by Mendoza, so the guy being transferred, extradited, by Spain, by the Spanish government, and the US government. Now again, this is a legally binding contract. This is a hell of a lot more than what Julian is getting and what most people get, right? It's rare, very, very rare that the United States ever signs something like this. Do you think they respected it? No, they still broke it. So, like even if Julian Assange were to get a legally binding contract, it would still be worthless, because the United States have a history of breaking all assurances, legally binding or otherwise. So a big problem, and for some reason the high court judges decided to ignore the fact that the United States has in an extradition case violated its assurances to another state. So I don't know how they can possibly trust anything that the United States promises to do or not do to Assange, but it really beats me. So again, for those of you who don't know and haven't read it, I published an article. I published the classified documents from the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Embassy in Spain regarding Mendoza's case, right? And these, like I said, they prove on paper, you can see it black and white, how they signed the document, they wouldn't transfer him, and he had to go and sue them in court until they finally transferred him. And it's you have to read it, right? So this is important to understand, because if the high court judges had done their jobs properly and looked at the evidence, we wouldn't be having this hearing today, right? The United States would not have won their appeal. They would have lost, because the British High Court would have said, the English High Court would have said, this is crap. Your assurances are worthless. Look at this case. In Mendoza's case, you didn't just give an assurance, you signed a contract and you broke it. You can't be trusted. We're not giving you Assange. So the fact that the British, that the English High Court judges abdicated their duties to scrutinize these assurances is the reason why we're having these hearings today, right? It's very important to understand that. So I'll just leave the link to these documents in the chat, so you can go and look at them for yourselves, right? And yeah, so Mendoza is again one of the he was one of the cases cited by Julian's lawyers during that stage when the United States was appealing the district judge ruling. Again, just so you understand, the ruling from 2021 has been appealed twice now. Once by the Americans, right? Because they said, we don't accept Julian Assange is sick, we want to extradite him. And that's why they gave the assurances to say, we promise we'll be nice to him. And now it's being appealed by Julian Assange's lawyers, because they're not happy with the fact the judge agreed with all of the political, bogus charges. Okay, so just so I hope that's clear to you guys, because it can be a bit tricky. But basically, both parties in this case have been unhappy with that decision for different reasons, and basically had the High Court judges, as I said, really looked at the history of the United States and how it handles assurances, they would have never allowed this extradition to go forward in the first place. So going back to the thread, they go on to talk about. Give me a second to find my place again. Yeah, so they talk about the second major part of this entire process, which is that Julian's lawyers are trying to contest the. So again, I'm going to try and summarize this. So the United States gave Britain assurances. The High Court accepted the assurances. They overturned the decision and said Assange can be extradited. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, she signed the extradition order. She okayed it. Then Julian Assange appealed this decision. He asked for leave to appeal with Jonathan Swift, who was the judge last year. He said no, and now they're trying to have another go at it. Okay, so basically, the fact that she signed this is not okay. Like just put the case aside for a second, the case itself and how the judges decided. The Home Secretary, she as the Home Secretary, she can block the extradition. It doesn't matter what the judges decide. It doesn't matter what's in the case. If she wants to, she can block it. She's not obliged to sign that paper. She can find whatever reasons she wants to and say, no, I refuse to send this person. So, so that by itself is one of is the second main part of this appeal that Julian Assange's lawyers are running. Okay, they are not okay with the fact that the judge agreed with the political charges, and they're not okay with the fact that the Home Secretary signed the extradition order. And so what Assange's lawyers did today is they explained that, in the past, if we look at Theresa May, you guys remember Theresa May was the Prime Minister, but before that she was a Home Secretary. And she famously blocked an extradition to the United States, from Britain to the United States, of Gary McKinnon. So Gary McKinnon is a really cool guy. I know him. And he basically hacked, he did the biggest computer hack in history. He hacked the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the Pentagon, NASA, like all of the government agencies. And it's funny in a way because he didn't really hack a lot of these computers. The security was just so crap. It's like someone leaving an unlocked door, open, so you just walk right in. So it wasn't really hacked, but basically, she blocked this extradition, and she cited the Human Rights Act as that reason. But in order to save her own skin and to appease the United States, look what she did. She said, no, I'm not going to send Gary McKinnon because it's bad for his health. He might kill himself. It would be egregious, an affront on his psychological well-being. But I'm going to make sure in the future other Home Secretaries are unable to do what I'm doing right now. Meaning, you're going to succeed in extraditing people from the UK to the US even more, right? So I mean, the whole treaty is, favors the United States to begin with, but she made sure that it's more difficult, not impossible, but more difficult for Home Secretaries to do that. Now, again, Assange's case is riddled with holes to the point that you can find literally any reason to block it, and it would be legitimate. It would actually have substance. So their point is that she could have looked at the extradition treaty and said, look, Article 4 says, Section 4 says you can't extradite someone for a political offense, period. You're not getting Assange. You just hate him because of his work. He didn't commit a crime. This is political, not having him. But she didn't do that, right? And then Summers also argued the fact that Julian Assange risks being killed. There's one aspect that the guy's 50 years old, so if you convict him of just 4 out of the 18 counts, that's 40 years in prison, right? So it's akin to a death sentence. But he was also talking about the fact that he's basically, the United States government have had it in for him and have literally planned to kill him, right? And they could turn this case into a case of capital crimes, right? So which are things like treason, like espionage, where you can get the death sentence. Remember, the United States is a country that still has the death sentence, death penalty, and then they want to lecture other people about, you know, democracy and rule of law. So in any case, you know, a capital crime is really, you know, one of the worst things that you could possibly do or be charged with. And already they're saying, oh, you're a spy and this and that. So it's very easy for them to you know, make this worse for Assange as soon as he gets there. And then kill him and so, you know, it's not only that, but the fact that you know, Chelsea Manning, for example, when she was court-martialed, they said that she's also guilty of treason, and you often hear Americans, for some reason, calling Julian Assange a traitor, which doesn't make any sense, because, you know, if you're a traitor to the United States, well, you have to be from the United States, and he's an Australian citizen, so I don't understand how he can betray a country that he doesn't even come from, but okay. So in any case, you know, going back to the closing arguments, they were basically saying that you know, the Home Secretary doesn't even dispute the fact that he could be given the death penalty. She knows this. She absolutely knows that he could be given the death penalty, and this is a violation, by the way, of the extradition treaty, right? Just give me a second. I think it's section 94, but just let me double check. Yeah, so the Secretary of State, meaning the Home Secretary, must not order a person's extradition if he could be or will be or has been sentenced to death for the offense concerned. So yeah, Section 94 of the Extradition Act addresses the death penalty, so she could also block it on those grounds, right? So, you know, the United States could easily just provide assurances, we're not going to kill Julian Assange. Very simple, but they don't do it, and the UK doesn't ask for them. Remember, this is a two-sided, you know, it takes two to tango. It's not just the United States, it's the UK government allowing this to happen, right? The UK judges allowing this to happen and just saying, you know what, do whatever you want. You know, we trust you, right? So that's really it. That's really it for today. Tomorrow we'll be hearing from the Americans and, you know, what they have to say. I will add that these judges that were present today, how can I put this? You know, this is the problem when you're dealing with the establishment, is that many people, and that includes some of the judges, not all of them, but some of them, they have ties to the intelligence agencies in the UK and the US, or ties, you know, to I mean, obviously they work with the government because they're in the judiciary. Yes, I know. But obviously they're going to be involved with the government to some degree. But I'm not talking about their day-to-day jobs. I'm talking about the links that they have, financial, you know, fraternal or otherwise. So we're talking about links that could cloud their judgment, that could constitute a conflict of interest, right? Like, how can you, for example, one of the judges that was in court today, this guy, he has previously in the past said that British soldiers did not commit war crimes against Iraqis, which is you know, it's just simply untrue. I'm sorry, if he wants, I can give him videos, but anyway, you know, he's saying that because in the UK you had these big investigations at some point, these inquiries, which, you know, it's like, well, you shouldn't have invaded the countries in the first place. You know, no one cares about these pretentious inquiries, which of course every time they clear British soldiers of wrongdoing, and no one is punished, you know, for really disgusting behavior in Afghanistan and Iraq. So in any case, my point here is just that this judge, who is now presiding over this hearing, has, you know, ruled and said in the past that he thinks no war crimes were committed against Iraqis by British soldiers. So when he's dealing with someone like Julian Assange, who is proving, yes, absolutely, these Western countries have committed war crimes, don't you think that's a conflict of interest? I certainly do think it's a conflict of interest. Now, at the same time, these judges, you know, from what I saw, they were very engaging, more than usual, actually. they seem to be actually interested in what's going on. They were inquiring to find out more details and better understand the arguments being presented by Julian's lawyers. So that was promising to see, but nevertheless, it doesn't. It doesn't forego the existing conflict of interest and other problems that I just mentioned. So these need to be taken into account, of course. Now, that's basically what happened today. Tomorrow the court will start at 10:30 a.m. London time, so I'll be inside and I'll be doing a live thread. And again, if you want to follow the live thread, this is the Twitter account, and that's the handle. And it got a lot of traction today. I'm very happy. Edward Snowden retweeted it, and WikiLeaks and so on. And I'm glad, because people need to find out what's going on. There's so many, it's not just like, oh, he exposed war crimes and they're punishing him. It's beyond that. It's really a death sentence for journalism. There's so many abuses of process and abuses of power throughout the entire case. It's really ridiculous. It's something that you wouldn't even see in a banana republic. So people absolutely need to find out and need to be aware of this. And it's cowardly of the media not to cover it in a manner that is adequate and becoming of such an alarming situation, because they profited greatly off of these endeavors and exploits that WikiLeaks undertook. These documents about war crimes in Iraq, war crimes in Afghanistan. These were on the front pages of The Guardian, the front pages of all these major papers. They profited greatly from these documents. They profited greatly from the fact that WikiLeaks chose them as media partners, right? And on the one hand, of course, you could argue that, yeah, it's great that they actually did it, because then more people, there was more, perhaps a better chance of circulation, assuring that people will see this because it's printed in the press, in the mainstream press, that it gets the exposure that it warrants and deserves. But at the same time, they're silent right now. Where have they been for the last 4 years? They should be defending Julian Assange. They should be pointing out the fact that this is, it's an egregious, horrific affront on journalistic freedoms, and it again, not only criminalizes journalism in the US, of course, it does it in the UK. And it's basically enabling future extraditions of this sort, where the United States can just pluck journalists they don't like from whatever country, because there's a precedent where they got away with it, So there needs to be very stiff opposition, needs to be very, very stiff and unrelenting, an unrelenting campaign of opposition to what's going on, because it's not a single decision. It's a continuous process of torture. Julian Assange is being tortured. When you put someone in a cell 23 hours a day in Belmarsh, I'm sorry, that's torture. That's torture, and it's nothing else. And it's sick, and it's depraved, and it's disgusting, and so disproportionate. I mean, what is that? You can't treat someone like that. What did he do? He's a mass killer or something? No, of course not. The irony is that he exposed the mass killers, mass murderers, and they get away with it. So what does that say? What does that tell you about the judicial system and so-called justice in Britain and America? It's non-existent. As a matter of fact, it's oppressive. The status quo is oppressive. Most of all, of course, to people who have been subjected to that colonial imperialist violence in Iraq, in Palestine, in Syria, in Libya, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and so on. This whole war, so-called war on terror, and many other things. So, at the end of the day, the work that is being done by Julian Assange, that's being done by WikiLeaks, it's indispensable, right? It's absolutely indispensable. The fact that they're trying to do this in broad daylight, it's shocking. It's really shocking to see this with your own eyes. I'm just like watching this unfold. I'm sitting in there and watching this whole thing unfold. Like, why does this need to be explained? That the U.S. government hates this guy and they want to kill him. How many quotes do you need from Donald Trump or from Mike Pompeo? How many witnesses do you need to understand this? You know that they hate him. You know that they're trying to kill him. Period. You know this. Don't play stupid. You're supposed to be a judge, and you're presiding over the goddamn judicial system and making decisions for the country. How do you not know this? You don't have any reason. Judges and lawyers are supposed to be capable of reasoning more than anyone else. How can they not see this? how can you possibly, you know, criminalize his work and then, you know, let these other people go free? It's atrocious, you know. So at every stage, you know, you have to remember that, for example, when Julian Assange applied for leave to appeal in the last stage, when Jonathan Swift, that other judge, he had to wait a year just to be told no. You know, like a whole year just for that tiny thing. And this whole process is, you know, even if he wins in the end, and we certainly hope he does, because it's not just his victory, it's a victory for you know, for any functioning judicial system and any free press. But even if he wins, they've still taken away years of his life and caused him to have a mini stroke and deprived him of his, you know, familiar life and so on. So it's really nasty stuff, nasty you know, regimes that we're dealing with. Regimes is certainly the correct word. There's no other way to describe it, because it's so ridiculous, it's so unwarranted that you cannot call it anything else except violent and oppressive, you know. And once again, like, okay, you want to prosecute Assange? When are we going to get around to prosecuting the criminals that he exposed? When do we get to that stage? When do we start, like, taking out you know, CIA agents to the courtroom and punishing them and putting them on trial for torturing people and kidnapping people and murdering people and you know, sexually assaulting people? When do we get to that? Do we ever get to that? Are we ever going to get around to that, or it's just Julian Assange and, you know, that's it? Because, you know, it's insulting. It's insulting and it's disgusting. So, you know, this is where we're at, and I'm giving you everything that's going on unvarnished and then my opinion. So it's you know, you can make up your own minds in the end. But everything that happened in the court, I gave it to you unedited, you know, explicit and straightforward. So this is just my opinion on what happened, because it's seriously, you know, it really says a lot about systems that function this way. And then having the nerve to lecture other countries and lecture other people like, oh, you're not, you know, civilized enough. Your judicial system is oppressive. You're a dictatorship. Man, I mean, how can you possibly talk about anyone else? You know, it's just hypocrisy on another level. In any case, I'll be in court tomorrow morning again. So that's 10:30 a.m. London time. If you want to follow the thread. And again, you know. All of this is just me. It's independent journalism, so please support the show if you can. Please support my work if you can, because remember that, you know, they demonetized the YouTube channel, so there's that thing, you know, on the one hand, having that revenue stream or income taken away, and then also trying to make up for it on Rumble and through the donation. So I'm really grateful to all of you who've chipped in and sent in a few dollars or euros or pounds on PayPal or Patreon. So thank you very much. And you know, if you're able to contribute, thank you very much. If you can't, make sure you share the videos. Any form of contribution is appreciated, and I'm very grateful. So yeah, you'll be supporting independent media. Keep that in mind. I'm just going to remind you, by the way, I'm just going to remind you guys to please subscribe, because some of you might have come over from YouTube, but you've forgotten to make an account on Rumble and subscribe. So please do that. I know it's annoying to sign up to websites, but please do it for me, because we're trying to rebuild. I was at 200,000 on YouTube when they demonetized it, which is really annoying. So we've got a few super chats over here. We've got one from Checkbird, who says, thanks for all your work, Richard. Thank you. And we've got one from Gold Alchemist, who says, thanks, Richard. Long live Palestine. Absolutely. So a lot of people coming around with the Palestine scarves at the court, which is good. So yeah, I had Mick Wallace and Claire Daly sitting behind me in the court. She had this scarf, the one that with the Irish colors. I have that one too. So you know, yeah, a lot of people bringing it inside the court and outside the court. It's really, really good to see that. Half the time they're chanting free Palestine, and then half the time free Assange. It's beautiful. So in any case, I'll be reporting live tomorrow again, and then after the the court is done, I'll be on a panel. There's a panel at 8:30 p.m. I'm not quite sure where it'll be broadcast. I think Consortium News will have a feed, so I'll be doing a panel at 8:30 p.m. And then of course I'll be on Rumble right here doing a recap for you guys. And if you are gonna be watching in the morning, I'll also be giving a speech outside the court before it begins. So yeah. Thanks again for all your help. Thanks again for all your support and for tuning in. Again, please remember to like the video, and please remember to subscribe, because I need your help, I need your support, and please donate if you can. This is all of the stuff I'm doing is independent. It's funded on my own. All the expenses are on me, but it has to be done. So any form of support is appreciated. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you again very much. Take care. Ma salame. Bye bye.